Hello, friends, and welcome to Grace St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm the Reverend Ollie Rencher, rector, and I'm joined today by Dan Conaway and Otis Sanford, and we are delighted to have them join us in a conversation to enlighten us about their book, In a Colorful Place. But before we begin, I'd like to open with a prayer from the Book of Common Prayer, and it is for the diversity of races and cultures. Let us pray. O God, who created all peoples in your image, we thank you for the wonderful diversity of races and cultures in this world. Enrich our lives by ever-widening circles of fellowship, and show us your presence in those who differ most from us, until our knowledge of your love is made perfect in our love for all your children. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
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 So as we are joined here, the three of us in conversation, we thank you wherever you are for tuning in to this part of 9:15 on Sunday mornings at Grace St. Luke's. And we have, as I mentioned, this great book entitled In a Colorful Place, Seasoned Opinions About Memphis, about home, about life. And so Dan and Otis, thank you for being my guest and being available to all who have tuned in today. I naturally am intrigued by how this came about. I have found and have been enjoying the book and have learned so much about Memphis and about the two of you, and am so inspired. But tell me about how did it happen?
Well,
background.
I had a notion, if you turn the book over, you're going to see a photograph back there that Otis and I are particularly fond of, that we're sitting at a counter having a conversation. And as simple as that may sound, the conversation between black and white is not as easily had as we've had those conversations in the past. That was a good position for us. And I thought that might be a good idea for Otis and me to share our columns together in the same book because of, and Otis will talk to this, I'm sure, but because of our different backgrounds, but also our shared love of this city. And the counter we had that conversation at is particularly significant, I think, because it is a counter in the civil rights movement. Those kinds of counters had great meaning. And this particular counter is the Arcade Restaurant, which from its inception, which is over 100 years ago, at the corner of G.E. Patterson and South Main, it was never segregated. That counter was always open, and the people outside on the sidewalk and at the train station and at the various hotels for salespeople up and down that stretch and various bars and other things were wide open, and in a city that wasn't. And so the arcade was in a good position. There was probably a dice game going on underneath that window right outside the street there, and the cops were probably looking the other way. It was an interesting counter from the beginning of history, and we had a very interesting conversation there. So it led to conversations about this book, and we did it, and we had a lot of fun. Even in the time of plague, we had a lot of fun, and we produced what we're both proud of as a good book and representative of what we both write and feel. So with that, I'd see what Otis thinks about all that.
Well, before you go on, I'll just say, to your point, Dan, I highly recommend this book. Friends, if you don't have a copy, go get it, and go get it quickly, because if you're needing hope and some inspiration about how to move forward in a polarized culture, this particular book I have found to be amazing in that regard. And so I'm grateful for that. And as Otis is about to sort of jump in, I am just fascinated that got two different people from different backgrounds, one city, one country, as it were, different racial. And I prayed in the prayer about the diversity of races and cultures. How did the two of you find yourselves in a dialogue like this?
Well, we're both very good looking guys.
Aside from both being beautiful children of God. That's right. Right.
Well, thank you for saying that. And
how did you come together? What brought you together in your careers or life and to this point, Otis?
I think Dan overstated the looks there a little bit, but
that it?
But you're right. I mean, we come from very different places historically. Dan from the city. I grew up on a farm in Mississippi in the 1950s and 60s. I think how we came together was a combination of a lot of things. Primarily, our love of words, our love of communicating. We didn't know it at the time, but both of us had a connection through the daily newspaper here, the Commercial Appeal.
Okay.
Dan's family has a long history in the Commercial Appeal, and I've always loved the Commercial Appeal.
Okay.
And I dreamed as a kid, as a Black kid growing up in Mississippi, I dreamed of one day being a reporter for the Commercial Appeal. And I never lost that dream. I'm talking about when I was like 10 or 11 years old.
Okay.
And so
Not that long ago.
not
Right.
that long ago. And so that's what drew us together. And of course, when I finally did move to Memphis and then left Memphis and then came back to Memphis, you know, it was just sort of, it was going to happen that Dan and I were going to meet, to know each other, to have those connections. And Dan is absolutely right. I think that the conversation we had at the arcade, which was not contrived at all, it was about as natural as you could have any conversation with any human being.
Okay.
And our love of writing, our love of communicating, our way with words, we decided, or he decided and talked me into it, that we need to combine what we have done over the last few years and share that with this community. And that's how the book came about.
I see. Well, as I have, you know, some of the things that, you know, come up for me is the different stories you tell from your particular perspective. And that's the power of relationship, right? That's the power of community. That's I would say the strength of community is when collective stories around a common place. And in this case, it's Memphis, but also just the common humanity. The two of you, I am privileged to know the two of you in different ways. Dan being a very active member here at Grace St. Luke's, and Otis I've met just over the years, and some other connections back to Mississippi. And to see the two of you together telling your story speaks to the power of story and how we can learn through story. And so a question that I bring is, Dan, for you starting out, what is it about your story that was so meaningful that you could bring Otis into it? You know, there's something about bringing another person into your story, especially from another place. What was it about that moment?
As Ollie is aware, and I'm sure Otis is too, central to my faith is the notion of being together at table. And this time it was together at counter, but we're also together at city. And the Daily Memphian, and I think I should say that, you know, that the Daily Memphian was something I was involved in from the beginning, and so was Otis, but it brought us together in pages, but it gave us a chance to be out there in the city as local journalists. And Otis certainly more of a journalist than I am. I'm primarily a storyteller, and if it happens to coincide with facts, that's kind of an accident. Otis is bound by facts. I'm bound by the story. So the two of us together in the same book allows us to measure both of those things. And every week we do the same thing when we're in the publication and out there to our audiences, to our readers in general. I mean, you're kind of, when you write a column and it's an opinion column, you're naked. I mean, you're
Right.
out there.
You're out there.
And you're saying, all right, this is what I think. Now you're free to take shots, and we both believe that people are free to do that.
And they do.
And they do.
Yes.
We want them to do it under their own name, and they increasingly don't do that. They do it under something like Big Bob 3 or something, but nevertheless, their opinions out there, and ours has been published. So the book represents that, and it was a great experience for me, and I hope for Otis. I think it was, but I mean, just putting us together in a city where that is a challenge constantly. Because when I grew up in Memphis in the 50s and 60s, there were two cities. There was a black city and there was a white city, and we crossed paths, but it was, from a white perspective, we crossed paths under a very controlled way. And from a black perspective, when we crossed paths, it was an accident. The opportunities were not there like they are now. And
Right.
I think we both explore that, our own backgrounds. Otis is from the farm, but still same thing in the city. I mean, we explore what that was like.
Mhm.
And what it's like now, and how it colors who we are, and what we have to say, and what we need to do today, every day.
Right.
So we
Well,
can't
thank
escape that, and we shouldn't. I mean, we shouldn't be those two cities. We should be one city, and the challenge of that remains.
Right. Well, thank you for that, Dan. Just that is where, and I said earlier about our being polarized. It's for centuries polarized for a variety of reasons, and it is typically because of a lack of awareness of the other and what truly makes the other unique or beautiful, or I talk about in terms of
Or what we
celebrating.
share with the other, rather than what makes it so different. What we share too.
That's right. Is what we have in common, how we are connected. And Otis, based on what Dan has just shared, you talk about your story and his story.
Mhm.
What was it like for you to come in relationship with someone, of course, in this case, who was a part of the commercial appeal and white Memphis and whatever that means to you and felt like to you as a country boy from Mississippi? I'm from the Mississippi Delta, so I'm from
Right.
Clarksdale. And know about both worlds because of the two worlds in which I've lived since primarily my college years,
Mhm.
especially of living in both worlds. And Dan knows that well because we're in a parish together. And so
Mhm.
what does that look like? But in your
I'll
case,
tell you what it looks like. It looks like this screen.
yes,
Yeah.
The city is about 66% African American right now, and this screen is too.
that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. And so Otis, with that, what was it like crossing that bridge?
Mhm.
Kind of picking up on a little John Lewis there for a moment, but
Right.
what does it look like for you to have crossed a bridge into relationship with Dan, who had power in a different way, and yet you found a common ground?
Well, I think to answer that, I have to say that I learned early on as a young man, and thanks to my parents for this, that they told me that if I was ever going to reach the goal that I was setting for myself, which was to be a writer, to be a journalist, you're going to have to push. You're going to have to fight hard. You're going to have to seek to be included. Inclusion is the word that I use a lot,
Okay.
because I had to fight to be included. When I went to college, I was included in I went to traditionally white colleges, and I had to sort of struggle a little bit, but not that much, because I had been writing since I was a young boy,
Okay.
6, 7, 8 years old. I started writing, so I fashioned myself as a good writer early on,
Okay.
and others saw that. And so when they see the writing and then see the face, they say, well, if you weren't that good of a writer, I could turn you down because of the face. But you are a good writer, so I have to include you.
Okay.
So I got included on the newspaper staff at
Okay.
Ole Miss, where I went to. I got included in covering some of the biggest stories that we covered on the campus. And then I got included by getting a job at the Clarion Ledger newspaper in Jackson, and I was the first African-American male that they ever hired as a reporter.
Okay.
And the same thing here in Memphis. I think I was the fourth or fifth Black reporter that they ever hired there. So I've always been fighting for that inclusion.
I see.
And so once I was able to get there, I was able to stay there.
Okay.
And so Dan said that, yes, he's a great storyteller. And I'm a good storyteller too, but I go for the jugular sometimes.
Okay.
I will talk about issues that I think people need to know and understand, although they may not like my point of view about it, because I'm talking about race relations. I'm talking about silly politicians. I'm talking about the lack of courage to make political decisions that I think should be made. And so yes, I'm a little more hard hitting than Dan. Dan likes to use the term, he writes stream of conscience, and he does, and he's so good at it.
Yes.
I write that to some degree too, but I'm also making you think twice about whether that politician should have done what they did, or whether it was fair that somebody got treated the way they did, or whether did you think about this when you're fighting about whether some local elected officials are being treated fairly or not. So that's how I come to this table, and Dan and I understand each other so well.
Yes.
That it was very easy for us to put this book together because of that.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
It was never a question of what would go in the book, because that was none of my business as to what Otis decided went in the book, and it was none of his. However, I think we both had faith that whatever we put in the book was going to be supportive in many ways of the other, and it has been.
That's right.
And it was.
That's exactly right.
The only exception I'll take there is that Otis writes a political column more than I do, but there are plenty of times that I have gone for the jugular.
Yes.
But not every week.
Not every week.
But this week and next are going to be two pretty good examples, and I may have to hide from mine.
Well, your priest is available.
That's right.
You know how to find me. Right.
But I do want to say something about polarization too, because when Otis said, even though I did say we were good-looking guys, I'm not so sure that Otis's in my face got us in anywhere. But if it did, in his case, because he was an African American, because maybe they thought, well, we're going to have to do that. What Otis writes and how Otis writes, he could have been purple. It didn't matter. I mean, because he is good at what he does, and that has earned him the right to stay in anywhere he's been. And the position he holds at the university is proof of the respect that has garnered him. From my standpoint, I have lost friends in the last 4 years that I have had for 60 years.
Okay.
That has been, and I mean, I've lost them. They're not coming back. Okay. That is a painful thing. But it also shows you that we have torn the country, we've torn the fabric that may have covered what was underneath for us to look in there and see that there were some ugly things, and we need to talk about that. And I have lost friends because of it. I've lost friends because of saying the things I've had to say in the last 4 years about who we are and what we look like and what we're saying. Are we really as ugly as we have become? Are we really supporting the things that have come out? And those are things we have to examine and say. And the whataboutism, which is, I think might be in the dictionary next year, not already. The whataboutism has got to stop. You can't say, well, that was awful, but what about? Well, no, it's awful. There's no what about.
Period. It's awful, period.
It's awful, period. And we've been writing, both of us have been writing about that. And for people to examine and look at who we are and what we should want to be, but also who are we as a city, and how will we move forward, and what do we do? And I will say this also, that when you have writer's block, which Otis and I are both familiar with, which is a frightening concept and a frightening reality many times, the state legislature ends that for me. I mean, whatever they may happen to be doing at the time, if I thought I was going to be writing about something else, I can always say, well, there's this. I mean, I can write about, certainly write about
like, oh, by the way.
Oh, by the way, or, oh, look at that. So just looking around at our city gives us plenty of occasion to write, both positive and negative, but plenty of occasions to write about our fellow citizens and each other, and how we interact with each other. And that's what we do.
Okay.
That's
well, thank you for that. I'm grateful. And my next question, and it's for each of you, and then I have a final question, is what part of the book, either the book itself and what was printed, or the experience, brought you the most joy or delight? You can interchange the term. What was the most delightful or joyful moment? As you know, and like I said, I've been in it, and I've just taken so much delight in experiencing it. But for you personally, maybe Otis, if you'd go first, where do you find the most delight or joy?
Well, the first delight, again, we've already talked about, is the back cover.
Okay.
I have very much delight in that cover on the back of Dan and me sitting at the arcade. That is just a delightful photograph.
Okay.
And it speaks to Memphis.
Okay.
But inside the pages, I have delight in being able to share with the readers of this book, not necessarily my personal story, which I get into a lot in the introduction, but the stories of some Memphians that they may not be, they may be well known, but I think I tell their stories, especially their final stories, in a poignant way. I'm talking about Russell Sugarman, for example,
right,
when he passed away, or Fred Davis, who was one of the first 3 African Americans on the city council when he passed away. I tell a story about Elmore Nickelberry, who was a city sanitation worker, and he's still around, God bless him, to this day. And he is enjoying, certainly 3 years ago during the 50th anniversary of the King assassination, he enjoys some newfound celebrity.
Right.
And he's still a humble man. And so I was able
and outside of Dickens, I don't think there's a name better than that.
Elmore Nickelberry. That's right. That's exactly right. He could be in a Charles Dickens book. There's no question about that. So those are what gave me the most joy.
Okay.
I think what gave me some satisfaction, though, was to help people to understand some things that they may not have thought about. And I'll give you one very quick example. I think it was 2 years ago, we had racial unrest in Frazier after not a sheriff, it was the U.S. Marshals Task Force tracked down a man who had ambushed and shot a guy and took his car in Hernando.
Yes.
And they shot and killed him because he said he was not going to be taken alive. And people in the community got mad about it, and there was unrest that night, and they were throwing rocks and bricks at the Memphis police who were not involved in it.
Right.
And then we had, unfortunately, some politicians in town, because I think it was an election year, and they were taking advantage of it and calling it a murder and all of that. Well, I wrote a column right after that said, there's one voice here that we have not heard from. And that was the voice of the young man in Mississippi who was shot and left for dead. And let's remember that he has a voice in this.
Right.
And I think people started to stop talking a little bit after that column ran, because I didn't hear any more after that about this being a murder.
Okay.
Because this young man, I'm sorry that he had to die, but he chose the path here by trying to shoot it out with law enforcement after he had shot and almost killed somebody. So that one gave me satisfaction there. But that's my answer to your question.
Okay.
Pastor.
And for you, Dan, joy, delight.
Well, it's kind of a Sally Fields moment. If you remember when she received the Oscar and said, "You like me? You really like me?"
Right.
Well, the platform that I have every week is not whether or not you really like me, but the platform that I've been given and that I've continued to have to be able to get out there and say what I feel. And then the joy is that there are people reading that, and they're reading it every week, and they let me hear about it, good and bad, but they're reading it. And that's all that I think, and Otis, I think will agree, that's all we can ask, is that people read it, because they don't have to. They've got a lot going on. And in a 24/7 world of information, to carve out a few minutes to read the two of us is a compliment. Whether you hate it or not, it's a compliment.
Yes.
And you're spending time with us. That's a joy. The joy is that both of us do the same thing. We try not to phone it in. I mean, you could, but we don't. And every week we put something out there. And like any writer anywhere, you turn your guts inside out, you pour it out on a page, and then it's out there for the world. And the fact that people read it is a joy. It continues to be a joy. And it forces me to take a look around every week and to pay attention and to understand the impact of what I see on the world we're in, and then be able to do that and have a place that people, that's not a blog, and it's not a tweet, and it's not a piece of email. It is something that somebody else chooses to publish, and they have a limited amount of space. Even in a digital world, they have a limited amount of space to do that, and they have an obligation to the public to put things out there that they want and should read. So it's a joy that we have that privilege.
Well, it is, and your final word is actually my response to both of you is a privilege. I have been privileged to read in a colorful place, and I'm going through it, and I have notes and all sorts of things. And if we had more time, I'd love for us to have a greater dialogue, and offline, the three of us, can gather in some way, and I can just sort of be in the midst of the two of you, and we can talk more about this, because the parting words that I have for those who tuned in today is conversation is one of the most important things we can do. And this book is coming out of conversation. As Dan and Otis have mentioned on the back cover, seeing the two of them engage with one another in conversation is priceless. And we live in a culture that doesn't have conversation well. And particularly what I call, and there's even a whole school around fierce conversation. You can look it up. Fierce conversation is when you can agree to disagree, but you still have enough love and respect for the other. And if we could get to that place, books like In a Colorful Place would be our story, our human story. And so
That's a wonderful expression, Ollie.
Yeah.
I mean, dinner at my house growing up was fierce conversation. I mean,
and our house too.
I like
right.
That.
That's what I'm saying. So I'm speaking from my father of blessed memory. We spent a lot of time in conversation, and you could not walk away. You could not walk away. You had to engage because the other person was holy and had something to offer, whether you liked it or not. And so I'm just so grateful. My heart is full today. I wish that we could be gathered in person, but we have this great technology, this digital world, as Dan mentioned, to offer so many things. And that's what we have done today. And I'm grateful that Grace St. Luke's is a friend of Otis, and Otis can be with Dan and me in this community. And want to say thank you, both of you, for today. And for those of you who've joined us, whoever you are, wherever you are always welcome in this place, where we don't go away from conversation. If anything, we do what we can to foster more of it. And it's because of what we believe about God as life and light and love. And so this great book, I'll hold it up one more time, is one that I hope you will get your copy. I have several on my shelf up here behind me, and I want to have a chance to get it signed by my friends. But those are my words as our time has come to a close. And we'll just say, Dan and Otis, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
this day, and thank you for the gift that you are. And friends, thank you for joining us here at Grace St. Luke's on Sunday mornings.